I turned 70 the week the leaves on Lake Mendota went the color of copper pennies. My coworkers booked the back room at Maple Cove, linen napkins, a string of lights that made everyone look kinder than they are in daylight. Someone I didn't know poured champagne and lined up the flutes like little bells waiting to ring. On my place card, Harold Whitman, sat a single glass. The rim had a chip no bigger than a thumbnail. I noticed it because I've spent a lifetime in household goods. Imperfections call my name. I reached to move it away from the edge. Kelsey was faster. "Let me get that for you," she said. Sweet voice, nails just done. She shifted my glass a half inch, then rested her fingertips at the stem as if to steady it, then let go. It wasn't a gesture anyone would have clocked, but I felt a quiet warning ring in my ribs. My son Mark was 2 steps behind her, tapping the side of his phone, not meeting my eyes. The room buzzed with stories about me that were mostly true. I raised my glass with everyone, felt the weight of it, the way the chipped spot snagged the pad of my thumb, and a thought, barely a thought, more a flicker, passed through me. Not this glass. I set mine down. I turned to my left, to the extra glass near the centerpiece. I switched them with a clumsy old man move. "You take the good one," I said to no one in particular. You learn when you age how to hide a boundary inside a joke. We drank. Toasts went on. The afternoon light slid lower. At the far end of the table, Kelsey's mother lifted her glass to sip before the next round of applause. She pressed a napkin to her mouth. Her face went pale. A tremor ran through her hand. Then the chair legs scraped back, too loud, and she was on her feet. And then she wasn't. The room split into people who rushed in and people who froze. I was one of the still ones. Not because I didn't care, but because something terrible and precise clicked into place in my head. The chip, the switch, Kelsey's hand on the stem, and the look she gave me when her mother fell. A look that flashed through panic to calculation, and then, very quickly, back to panic. An ambulance came. The manager hovered, asking about liability and whether he should save the bottle for the police. "Yes," I said, too fast. "Yes, save that bottle." I kept my voice even. I asked for the receipt from the bar, the one with the timestamps. He printed me a copy. I slid it into my jacket pocket like it was any other keepsake from a party. Mark found me by the coat rack. "Dad, you okay?" "Of course," I said. "You go with him." He nodded, torn, then went. Kelsey stayed with me, eyes rimmed red, mascara careful. "What a horrible, horrible accident," she breathed. "I'll check on the bill," I said. "Make sure the tip's right." I could smell something sweet on the air near our table. You don't live to 70 without knowing what doesn't belong in a room. I slept poorly. My phone lit at 2:11 a.m. with a message I wasn't supposed to see. The preview read, "We need his signature before the 1st." The sender's name was blocked behind a privacy screen, but the words stayed on my retina like afterburn. Morning brought a slow, steady kind of resolve. Not rage, not even fear. A square of calm I could stand on. I called Alicia Kerr, my estate attorney, the kind who listens twice before she speaks once. I told her every detail I remembered. The chip on the rim, the switch, the fall, the manager setting the half-empty bottle aside. I told her about Kelsey's hand and the way Mark avoided my eyes. She didn't gasp or dramatize. "Document everything," she said. times, names, what you physically handled. Keep your hands off the bottle now. It's not in your possession, and that's good. Do you have the bar receipt? I do. Photograph it. Email me a copy. And, Harold, don't confront anyone directly. There's a process. We'll ask for toxicology on whatever liquid is left. I'll also want you to see a doctor today. Not because I think you were dosed. Because you need a medical record living in the world dated today. How to? If you suspect tampering at a family event, note the exact objects, glassware, bottles, receipts, and who touched them. Photograph documents and ask the venue to preserve items. Then call your attorney before you call anyone else. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. I hung up and left the house before the street woke up. I stopped by the hospital to ask about Kelsey's mother. A nurse with the right mix of kindness and firmness said she couldn't share specifics. I said I understood, but asked if a plant compound had been discussed. She didn't answer the question. She looked at my face, and her eyes flickered to the side. I can ask a physician if there's anything you need to know for your safety, she said, if you leave your number. At home, I took the receipt from my pocket and read the tiny printed timestamps. The champagne was poured at 4:08 p.m., a second round at 4:37. I wrote those numbers in my notebook, then wrote the word chip and drew a circle like a rim with one broken notch. I drove to Maple Cove to speak with the manager. He had eyes like a man who just discovered lawyers exist. The bottle sat in a locked cabinet. We're waiting to hear from the family, he said. You're doing the right thing, I said. Would you note on your copy of last night's receipt that you preserved the bottle at my request? Just the time and your initials? He did. I took a photograph that captured his hand in frame. I called Alicia from the parking lot. Good, she said. I'll draft a preservation request to the restaurant and to the police. Wait for me on the rest. By noon, Alicia had me in her office with a glass of water and a legal pad. She walked me through my own estate plan as if she were showing me a map. Your will's fine, she said. The trust we set up is fine, but it was funded before the sale of your company. That money is parked properly, but your powers of attorney are older. We need to make sure no one is pressing you to sign new ones. Or I thought of the message on Mark's phone, before the first. What happens, I asked carefully, if someone presents a photocopied POA? Something from the printer that smudged the notary seal, say? If you didn't sign it, it's worthless, she said. If you sign something under pressure, there's more to talk about. And if anyone waves paper at you, you call me. No one should be toggling your medical or financial life without a chain of verification. The rest of the day I moved quietly. I bought a set of doorbell cameras that fed to the cloud. I changed the passwords I should have changed months ago. I called my bank, added alerts so loud they might wake the dead, and asked them to flag any new beneficiary forms. By evening, I had a voicemail from a private investigator named Ben Ortiz. Alicia looped me in, he said. You're not the first client to call after a retirement party goes sideways. If you want, I can run a quick legal scrub on public records, liens, judgments, a skim of financial stressors. Sometimes these situations sit on top of a stack of debts. We met the next morning at my kitchen table. Ben had a face like granite you might find at the edge of a lake, weathered, unmovable. He opened a folder and slid a printed page toward me. Public record search. Your daughter-in-law has an LLC that's not doing well. 2 maxed out cards. And this, he placed a life insurance statement on top of the stack. A policy for $500,000 with your name as the insured. Taken out 2 years ago. Premiums overdue. The paper made a dry, whispering sound as I lifted it. The numbers were small but sure. 500,000. Beneficiary, M. Whitman. My son, I said. The words sat in my mouth like a coin you can't swallow. Policies can be legitimate, Ben said, even. Families cover final expenses all the time. But timing matters. Pressure matters. Patterns matter. I told him about the text preview. He nodded. We won't touch her phone, he said. But if a family member volunteers screenshots, that's different. He looked at me. Any allies? Ellie, I said. Mark's daughter, 19. Soft heart, sharp eyes. I didn't want to use her. I didn't want to use anyone. But I also didn't want to be moved like furniture in my own life. I met Mark for coffee on a bench near the lake. The gulls bickered. The wind made a clean sound. Dad, he said, looking young in a way he hadn't in years. I'm not signing anything new, I said. Calm. Not today. Not this month. Not before the 1st. If there's paperwork, it goes through Alicia. If there's a medical evaluation, it's with a physician she chooses. I'm not going to a facility because anyone is tired of my company. If you need help, ask me. Don't try to board me like a dog. He flushed. It's not like that. Then it will be easy to respect my boundary. He nodded, eyes on the water. Kelsey worries, he said, about money, about security, about everything. He didn't finish the sentence. You're my son, I said. You can worry with me, but you don't get to worry over me like I'm a problem to solve. We let that sit. He stirred a coffee he wasn't drinking. When we stood, I put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed once. He didn't lean in, but he didn't pull away. How to? State your boundary in one sentence. Clear, specific, without apology. Then repeat it once, the same way. Follow up in writing to the people who need to hear it, and copy your attorney or advisor so the boundary has witnesses. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. That evening, a manila envelope appeared at my door. No return address. Inside were 3 pages. A blurry photocopy of a financial power of attorney bearing a signature that was more like my name than not. A notary seal that smudged into a gray thumbprint. And a sticky note. Check the date. The date read 2 weeks from now. I called Alicia. She listened. We'll treat this as a potential forgery, she said, voice cool. Do not respond to whoever sent it. I'll log it. I'll notify the police of a possible attempt to create or use a fraudulent instrument. For now, Harold, I want you to come in tomorrow and we'll execute a fresh set of documents that revoke and replace all prior powers of attorney. We'll also insert a verification requirement. 2 professionals must certify capacity before any POA is honored. That won't stop a criminal, but it will slow a schemer. I slept the way people sleep when they know a plan is forming in their favor. Lightly, but with fewer spikes of dread. In the morning, Ellie texted without preamble. Grandpa, is Kelsey in trouble? She sent a screenshot. We need his signature before the 1st. And added, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I told her we would keep her out of the middle. I told her I loved her. That will be my last text if the world ever takes speech away from me. At Alicia's office, we executed fresh documents. I initialed each page. I looked into a camera and answered capacity questions that were not unkind. I felt old and not at all diminished. I left with a folder and a recorded message from Alicia. If anyone hands you anything to sign, call me. If anyone says it's just a formality, call me again. And remember, silence is not consent. Ben, meanwhile, was widening the circle. He found an email from Kelsey to a clinic 3 suburbs over. Subject: competency evaluation. The body contained 2 words: can expedite. He wouldn't have had the email without a relative who'd been blind copied once or twice and felt queasy now. Families can become their own weather systems. Pressure buildups, sudden storms, someone deciding to open a window. I invited everyone to dinner. Not a confrontation. Just roast chicken, potatoes, the kind of meal that tastes like a promise. When the plates were cleared, I set a simple object at the center of the table, a single sheet of paper beneath a sheet protector. This came to my door, I said. It claims I've granted broad powers over my finances. It is dated for a day that hasn't happened yet. I have revoked and replaced all such documents with my attorney this morning. If anyone hands me a pen without her present, I will assume bad faith. Kelsey breathed in sharply. Who would do that? She asked, as if reading from a script she'd practiced. I don't know, I said. Truthful in the way a black and white photograph is truthful. What I do know is that we're going to let the police look at it. I slid the paper back into the envelope. Mark stared at his hands. Ellie stared at me as if she had never known me well, and now she did. I topped up the water glasses. Ordinary motions gentled the room. We all want security, I said. We all want to feel okay. But no one here gets to make me unsafe to get there. Kelsey cleared her throat. Her smile looked like a mask 2 sizes too small. We just worry, Harold, she said. You forget things. You leave the stove on. I turn around and turn it off, I said. That's not incompetence. That's cooking. The next morning, Alicia filed a police report with the photocopied POA attached. She sent a formal request to the restaurant asking that the champagne bottle be released to law enforcement for toxicology. I returned to Maple Cove with a detective who carried the bottle like it was a sleeping child. I provided my statement. Simple, chronological, exact. How to. When you speak to police, stick to sensory facts. What you saw, what you touched, what you heard, and the order they happen. Save conclusions for the professionals. Ask for your incident number and keep copies of what you gave them. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. Ben came by that afternoon with another page for the file. An email thread between Kelsey and someone at an elder care facility. Phrases like available bed, intake paperwork, and a line that made my skin tighten. We can schedule evaluation on site if family prefers. Paper doesn't convict, he said, but it paints. I stood at the kitchen counter and looked at what we'd gathered. The bar receipt with its little timestamps, the photograph of the manager's initials, the screenshot of a text that bared its teeth without knowing, the photocopied POA with the wrong month printed like a confession. I placed each item in a clear page sleeve and slid them into a binder. It felt almost ceremonial, the way a body prepares to endure. The detective called on a Thursday. We've sent the liquid for testing, he said. Turnaround is quick if the lab is not backed up. We'll keep you informed. Thank you, I said. I appreciate your care. He paused. Not many people would have noticed a chipped rim, he said. I've made a life noticing small things, I said. Sometimes they're the only things that matter. That night, the house felt too big. I went down to the basement and pulled out a wooden box that used to hold holiday cards. I emptied it and wiped it clean. I cut small slips of paper and stacked them inside. I wrote a sentence on the first one in a cramped hand that looks like my father's. I will not be moved without my consent. I folded the paper and tucked it under the rest. In the morning, I brewed coffee and listened to the city rise. I pictured Alicia at her desk, Ben in his car, the detective at a lab bench, Ellie walking to class with her backpack angled wrong. I pictured Mark standing in the kitchen, watching Kelsey scroll and scroll, those small muscles in his jaw working, not sure which way to turn. The phone rang at noon. A nurse from the hospital where Kelsey's mother lay. I'm calling because you asked if there was anything you needed to know for your safety, she said. I can't speak to another patient. But I can tell you the toxicology screening we ran detects common plant alkaloids. It did detect them. I'm sorry I can't say more. You've told me enough, I said. My hand went to the counter for balance. Thank you. When I hung up, I wrote the word oleander on a sticky note and folded it in half. I didn't like writing it. I didn't like the shape of it in my mouth. I put the folded note into the wooden box, as if the act could absorb some of the poison from the air. I drove to the station and gave the nurse's message to the detective. He listened without interrupting. He took notes. He said, "We'll wait for our official lab report, but this is consistent with what we're seeing." At home, the afternoon light made the dining table shine. The binder sat in the middle of it. I opened it and read the first page, the receipt, out loud. Then the handwritten note I'd made beside it. 4:08, first pour. 4:37, second. I read the time the ambulance was called. I read the words, "We need his signature before the first." The house didn't answer back. It didn't need to. It felt like a witness that had decided to be on my side. I made a simple dinner. I ate it at the table where I had been a husband and a father, and now was a man learning how to be the center of his own life again. I washed the plate and left it in the rack to dry. The camera doorbell clicked and hummed, storing its small squares of truth in a cloud I would never see but knew I could call upon. And I waited, not passively, not helplessly, with my feet planted on the square of calm I'd measured and made, waiting for the lab to speak a word that would turn suspicion into something the law could hold. B3, full VUO. Part 2-2, English, VO only. Act 4. The lab report arrived on a Friday. The kind of bright, brittle autumn day that convinces you nothing cruel could happen under a sky like that. The detective called first. Then Alicia. Their voices were careful in the same way surgeons are careful. The liquid tested positive for cardiac glycosides, consistent with oleander, the detective said. Trace, but present. The chain of custody is clean. We'll move forward. I stood by the kitchen sink and looked out at the maple leaves skating the yard. Thank you, I said. The word felt too small. Expect contact from our prosecutor, he added. We'll need a formal statement distilling your notes. After I hung up, I didn't pace. I didn't collapse. I pulled the binder closer, slid a new clear sleeve in, and placed the lab results behind the bar receipt and the photograph of the manager's initials. I ran a finger under the word oleander once, as if verifying the letters would hold their edges if I touched them. I remembered my father teaching me to label jars in the garage. "What's in a container matters," he'd said. "What it's called matters more." The doorbell camera chimed, and a moment later Mark's knock sounded like a question that wanted to be answered. I opened the door. He had the look of someone who slept but did not rest. "Dad," he said, "can I come in?" We sat at the table. He saw the binder and didn't reach for it, which made me want to hand it to him. "Police got a result," he said, half statement, half permission to proceed. "They did," I said. "It's what we thought." He stared at his hands. "I told myself there had to be another explanation," he said. "I told myself she's just scared. I told myself if I could get you to sign a few things, just for now, we'd all calm down. But I knew. I knew something was wrong. I didn't want to look directly at it." "Looking away doesn't make a thing smaller," I said. "It only makes you smaller next to it." His eyes shone. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "It helps." He took a breath that sounded like a man surfacing. "The detective called me too," he said. "They're asking for Kelsey to come in. She's saying it's a mistake, or it was cross-contaminated, or the bottle sat too long, or—" He stopped. "Excuses grow on trees. We're not the ones who need to make a case," I said. "We only need to tell the truth, once, in order." That night, Ben brought another piece of paper, a printout of an email thread with the subject line, "Intake." Simple words, stark implications. "They'll see the timing," he said. "Evaluation scheduled, signature needed before the 1st, policy overdue." The story tells itself even when nobody wants to hear it. I wrote another sentence for the wooden box. "I will not let urgency make my decisions for me." I folded it and tucked it under the 1st. Alicia asked me to come in for what she called housekeeping. She used the general word and then gave me strong tools. We amended the trust. We added a clause that would act like a fuse if anyone attempted to use a power of attorney without 2 independent capacity certifications. Distributions would lock to essential expenses, and an independent CPA would step in as a temporary co-trustee. If anyone petitioned a court to have me declared incompetent without foundation, a charitable provision would trigger, moving a portion of my estate out of reach and into a fund for caregiver support. "You're not punishing your family," she said. "You're removing incentives that attract bad behavior. You're designing for your own safety." I initialed the margins where she placed tabs like little flags on a coastline. "Thank you," I said. "How to?" "When you update estate documents in a crisis, amend with calm precision. Add verification steps for capacity, neutral third-party oversight for spending, and automatic guardrails that reduce financial incentives for undue influence. Keep originals with your attorney and provide only summary letters to family. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional." The detective scheduled interviews. Mine was a simple room, a table, 2 chairs, a digital recorder I could hear but could not see. I told the story the way a clock tells time, chronological, measured, faithful to the ticks and tocks. I described the chip on the glass, the switch, the napkin to the mouth, the smell that did not belong. I placed the words, "I do not know her intent," and "I feared for my safety," like bookends around the parts that were mine to own. When it was over, I walked out into sunlight that seemed the right temperature for a human being who had done his part. Kelsey's interview came and went without me. I didn't ask for details. I went on a small errand, buying a new coffee maker because the old one sputtered and hissed. The man at the store recognized me from a long ago promotional poster. We both pretended he did not. I drove home with something small and useful in the passenger seat and let that be a way to keep breathing in rhythm. Late Sunday afternoon, Mark texted, "Can I bring Ellie by?" I told him, of course. They arrived with a pie from a place that has never made a bad pie. We ate it at the table without occasion, like regular people, which felt like a blessing handed down the line from some ancestor I never knew. Ellie asked if she could see the wooden box. I brought it out and read her the 2 lines I had written. She nodded like someone who has learned young that adults are fragile and still want it. "Can I write one?" she asked. She wrote, "I will not be afraid to tell the truth." She read it out loud. It made a new light in the room. Act of oath. The prosecutor filed charges on a Wednesday. Words on a page I never wanted to see became the fence that kept the wolves from my door. Kelsey was processed. Conditions set. A no-contact order entered my life like a quiet bodyguard who never sleeps. I didn't celebrate. I made soup. I watered the plant my wife had loved. The one I've almost killed twice and then revived, with a little faith and a lot of listening. I called Alicia and said I was ready to finish the practical work. "It will be a relief," I said, "not having open doors that don't need to be open." We closed accounts that didn't serve a purpose. We consolidated records. We set a spending plan that named what mattered: property taxes, health care, a small, modest fund labeled gifts without strings. We wrote to my financial advisor and said no beneficiary changes would be honored without Alicia's written sign-off and a 10-day cooling period. We set a rule that any emergency requests from family will be answered on the 11th day. How to? Establish boundary rituals for money and access. Use waiting periods for big decisions. Require 2 independent confirmations for capacity. And communicate your rules in writing to every institution that touches your life. Tell your family once, calmly, and then let the rules do the talking. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. I invited Mark to meet me at the park. He came alone, hands deep in his jacket pockets. "I'm starting therapy," he said without preface. "Family stuff, boundaries. The word makes me itch, but I think it's the right itch." "It is," I said. "It's the feeling of skin growing where you were scraped raw." "I don't know if my marriage survives this," he said. His voice wavered. "I don't know who I am in it anymore." "You are still my son," I said. "That doesn't expire." He looked at the water a long time. "I'm angry," he said, "at her, at me, at the way we let money stand in for love." He shrugged, helpless and human. "I'd like to do better." "Do better one act at a time," I said, quietly enough to hear yourself. The case moved along the way. Cases move, slow where the heart wants fast, fast where the heart wants slow. There were hearings. There were continuances that sounded like sighs. There were days when I wanted to shout into a room that didn't belong to me. Instead, I wrote another sentence and placed it in the wooden box. Patience is not surrender. It's stamina. Weeks turned to months that fit together. I cleaned out drawers that hadn't been opened since my wife died. I labeled photos with names and dates. And when I didn't know a name, I called Ellie and we made one up just to keep the person company. We ate dinner on Thursdays, just the two of us, and talked about classes and friends and my new indifferent coffee maker that makes exactly what it promises and nothing more. The day the plea came, it came with the ordinary mail. Alicia called, and I braced without realizing. She's agreed to plead to an attempted poisoning charge, she said. Sentence will be the court's, but there's acknowledgement on paper now. You will have the chance to submit a victim impact statement, if you choose. I sat at the table. I placed both hands flat on the wood. I don't want to speak to her, I said. I want to speak to the room. To say that older isn't weaker. That fear doesn't look like a tremor. That quiet is a way of choosing. Say exactly that, Alicia said. The court understands more than you think. I wrote my statement in pencil first, because it makes edits feel gentler. I kept it short. I told the court that my life was not a ledger to be balanced by my children, and that my consent was not a line item to be filled. I said that the law, used well, can be a shield rather than a hammer. I asked for a sentence that would hold the truth up in daylight long enough for others to see the shape of it. On the day of sentencing, I wore the good jacket my wife had liked, the one with the mended seam that nobody but me could find. I didn't look at Kelsey when she was brought in. I looked at the judge, at the flags, at the clerk who has to say names all day long and pronounce them correctly. The court spoke in the language it owns. Conditions, years counted and then divided, terms that set boundaries I would never have had the courage or authority to set alone. When it was over, I walked out into air that smelled like cold and bakery sugar and a little bit like new tires. I closed my eyes and breathed all the way down. That evening, we had a small ritual. Ellie brought a shoebox full of photographs. Mark brought the pie again, because some traditions are large enough to hold complicated days. I set the wooden box in the center of the table and took out the slips of paper, one by one. I read them aloud. Ellie added a new one. Love is a boundary you honor, not a prize you win. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We talked about safety. We talked about the small ways people show up for each other. Texting when you get home, saying the time you'll arrive and then arriving at that time. We ate and then washed the dishes together. The house felt like it had moved closer to itself. After they went home, I sat with the binder and then set it gently on a high shelf. Not hidden, not displayed. Available. I made tea. I walked to the window where the camera's little LED winks like a creature that doesn't sleep. I raised my cup to the dark yard and to the version of myself who had noticed a chipped rim and believed his own eyes. I am not naive. There will be echoes. Boundaries require maintenance. Trust is a garden you don't water once. But the worst has a shape now, and the shape is outside me. Inside, things are quiet. Not empty, not numb. Quiet the way a room is quiet when everyone who should be there is there, and no one is trying to leave with the silverware in their coat. Before bed, I wrote one last line for the day and placed it in the wooden box. My life is still mine. I closed the lid and felt, in the small bones of my hand, something like a door clicking shut. Comment. See, Thea, if you were in Harold's place, what one boundary, financial or personal, would you write on your first slip of paper?